I have kept the tide ledgers at low kettle for longer than most of the folk in it have been alive, and in all that keeping I never learned to write down the one thing that mattered most. There is no column for it. You can tally salt weight and net loss, and the count of skiffs that go out against the count that come back, and I have tallied all of that with 4 good eyes and a steady hand. But there is no line on any page for what a person is worth, and I am glad of it now, because if there had been such a line the buyers would have won. Let me tell it the way it happened, since I am the one still here to tell it. Low Kettle is not a place anyone chooses. It is a place you end up. The town hangs off the black cliffs above the Gray Race, which is the fast channel where 2 tides meet and fight, and it is built in terraces the way barnacles build, one shelf of stone clinging above another. Drying sheds and greenhouse frames and rope walks all lashed to the rock with whatever came to hand. My people the Ole are dock folk by long habit. We are squat and slow and patient, and we do not mind the wet, and we do not mind waiting, which is most of what living at the kettle is. Humans came late to it, the way humans come to most hard places, a few at a time, quiet, carrying more than they said. By the time the thing I am telling you began, there were maybe 200 souls on the terraces, of 6 or 7 kinds, and one human among them who mattered more than all the rest, though he would have been the last to say so. His name was Halden. If he had another name he never gave it to me, and I never asked, because at the kettle a man's name is his own business and his hands are how you judge him. Halden's hands were how everyone judged him in the end. He was old the way the cliffs are old, worn down to what would not wear. Gray at the temples, gray in the stubble, a face gone to leather from wind, and eyes that had seen too much medicine done badly and had decided, somewhere along the road, to do it well or not at all. He had been a field medic once, in some war I never got the shape of, on some world I never learned the name of. He did not talk about it. What he did was mend. He set the bones of anyone who came to his shed with a broken one, and he sewed the nets of anyone who brought him a torn one, and he did both with the same patience and the same silence, and he never once in all the years asked to be paid before the work was done. That is a rare thing anywhere. At the kettle it made him something close to holy, though he would have spat at the word. I tell you all this about Halden first because you need to understand what kind of man was standing in that shed door when the buyers came. Not a hero, not a soldier still. An old mender who had decided, long before Nemi, that he was done letting the wrong thing happen where his hands could reach. Nemi did not make him into that. Nemi only gave the thing he already was something to stand in front of. She came to us out of a wreck. It was the season the Gray Race runs its hardest, when the 2 tides come up the channel at the same hour and throw everything they carry against the reef below the town. We lose skiffs to it most years. We lose worse than skiffs some years. That season a ship that was not ours broke up on the reef in the dark, a harvest skiff, low and gray and unmarked, the kind that runs without lights because it does not want to be seen coming or going. It went to pieces on the black teeth of the reef, and by dawn the race had strewn the whole cove with it, hull plate and cable and shattered crates and the bodies of the ones who had crewed it, which were not human and not old and not any kind we knew, and which the tide took back out before we could learn much from them. Salvage law at the kettle is simple. What the sea gives, the town keeps. So the town went down at low water with hooks and lines to take what the sea had given. I was too old for the rocks by then, so I kept the ledger on the shelf above, tallying what came up. Cable, plate, a crate of dried protein cake gone to paste, a drum of some chemical that ate the paint off the hook that touched it, which we rolled back into the sea. And then, near mid-morning, when the light had come gray and flat over the water, Halden, who had gone down with the rest, because he always went down with the rest, stood up from a heap of shattered crating at the edge of the surf and did not call out and did not wave and simply stood there still, with something small held against his chest. And I knew from the shelf above, from the way his whole body had gone careful, that the sea had given us something that was not salvage. She was small. That is the first thing, and it is the thing I keep coming back to. She was small enough that Haldon could hold all of her against his chest with one arm, and she was so still that from the shelf I thought at first the sea had given us a dead child, and I set down my stylus and I did not breathe. But she was not dead. She was Iu, though none of us knew that word yet, a small person the pale green of sea glass, with skin that went nearly clear at the fingertips and the rims of the ears, and great dark eyes with a second lid that came across sideways when she blinked, and no hair but a fine soft down along the crown that lay flat when it was wet. She had been in one of the shattered crates. She had been packed in it the way you pack something you mean to sell. There was a number stenciled on the wood. Haldon carried her up the terraces himself and would not let anyone else take her, and he brought her to his shed, and the town crowded the rope walk outside it, and I came down from my shelf because I am the ledger keeper, and it is my business to know what has come to the kettle. He had laid her on the cot where he set bones. He had a lamp close and his hands moving over her the way his hands moved over everything, gentle and certain, reading her by touch the way he read a fracture. She was awake by then. She watched him with those great dark eyes, and she did not cry, and she did not pull away. And I have thought since that this was the most terrible thing about her, in those first hours, that a child so small had already learned that crying does no good and pulling away does no good, and had put both away somewhere deep where they would not be wasted. "She's cold," Haldon said to no one to himself. "Runs cold, that's how they made." He said it the way you say a thing you already half know and hate to have confirmed. He got a wool wrap around her. He got warm water into her, a little at a time from a cup he held. And all the while his hands kept finding places on her. An old scar along one forearm, a seam of paler green across the back of one hand, a fingertip on the left that was newer than the others, softer, the nail not grown in yet, and each place he found, his face went a little harder, and I watched a man I had known 10 years turn to iron in front of me, quietly, without a word, the way water turns to ice. It was old Merritt, who keeps the greenhouse 3 terraces up and has traded across half the reach in her time, who put the word to it. She had come with the crowd, and she stood in the door of the shed a long while looking at the child, and at last she said, "Lo, that's Iu. I've heard of them, never seen one." And when Haldon looked up at her she said the rest, because Merritt is the kind who will say the rest even when no one wants it. They're bought and sold, mender. That's what they're for, out where they come from. And she stopped and looked at the child and chose her words the way you choose your footing on wet rock. They mend themselves, cut them and they close, take from them and it comes back. So the houses that deal in such things keep them like. And she stopped again and did not say the word, and to her credit she never did say it in front of the child, not that day and not ever. But we all knew the word she did not say. Stock. They kept them like stock. A thing you could draw from and draw from because it grew back. A body priced by what could be taken out of it and how many times. Haldon did not say anything for a while. He got the wrap tighter around the small one, and he tucked it under her chin with 2 fingers, and she watched him do it. And something in her watching was so patient and so old that I had to look away, 4 eyes and all. Then he said, still not loud, "She has a name." And Merritt said, "They don't give them names, numbers." And Haldon looked at the stencil on the crate board that someone had carried up with her, the number that had been meant to travel with her wherever she was sold. And he took the board out of the child's sight and set it face down on the floor, and he said, "She has a name now." He thought a moment. Outside the shed the wind came up the channel and made the whole town creak on its lashings. And somewhere below the gray raced through itself against the reef, over and over, patient as my people, and the child turned her head at the sound of it. "Nemi," Haldon said. "I do not know where he took it from. I never asked." But he said it to her direct, the way you say a true thing to a person and not a made thing to a possession, "Nemi." And the child looked at him when he said it, and did not understand the word, but understood, I think, the shape of what it was, which was a gift, and the first she had ever been given. That was the beginning. I have gone slow over it because it deserves slow. Everything after went faster than any of us wanted. She healed. Not the way we mean it when we say a body heals. She healed the way weather clears completely, leaving no sign there had been a storm. The scrape she took on the terrace steps her second week was gone by the third with not a mark. The fingertip that had been half-grown when she came to us filled in over a month, nail and all, and Halden marked it in his own book. He kept a book, though not a ledger like mine. His was for the body, and he wrote in it small and close. He marked how long it took, not because he wanted the knowing, but because a mender wants to understand what is in front of him, and he wanted to understand her. And what he understood and what he said to me once on the rope walk when it was only us and the wind was this: "It's not a gift, Alan. Out there it's a curse. A body that gives and doesn't run out, that's not a blessing to the ones who own you. That's a well they never have to stop pumping." He looked down at the race a while. "The kinder the world, the worse it'd be for her. Somebody'd want to be gentle about it. Draw from her slow so she lasts. Call it care." He said it flat without heat, and the flatness was the heat. I've seen men be gentle like that. I'd rather they weren't. I did not have an answer for that. I am a ledger keeper. I count what is. I set it down in my 4 eyes and I did not forget it. But I want to tell you the good part, before I tell you the hard part, because the good part is the true center of this, and the hard part is only what came for it. Nemi at the kettle was, for the better part of a year, only a child at the kettle. That is the whole marvel, and it is easy to miss because it sounds like nothing. She learned the terraces. She learned which rope walks held her small weight and which would only hold an ole's flat feet, and she learned it by trying, and skinning herself, and healing, and trying again. And the healing meant she learned faster than the rest of us ever could, because a child who cannot be badly hurt by a fall will try the falls the rest of us won't, and Halden let her, which cost him something every single time. I watched it cost him. He would stand at the door of his shed with his mending in his hands and watch her go up a rope walk that would have frightened any parent, and his jaw would work, and he would let her, because he had decided, this is the thing about him, he had decided that keeping her from living to keep her from harm was only the buyer's logic wearing a kind face. He would not do their arithmetic. If the choice was a scared child kept whole or a whole child let to be scared, he chose the child, and let the world be scary, and stood in the door with his heart in his mouth, and his hands not moving on the net. She took to me because I am slow and I am patient and I do not mind waiting, and a child who has learned to be still recognizes another creature that has learned to be still. She would come and sit on the shelf by my ledger and watch me tally, and after a while she began to point at a mark, at a number, and make a small sound, questioning, and I began to teach her, without deciding to, the way the marks stood for things. She learned them fast. She learned everything fast. She had a mind like the race, quick and deep and always moving, and it had been packed in a crate with a number on it. And that is a thing I set down in my 4 eyes too, and did not forget. She did not speak much, and when she did it was in a small clear voice that used few words and used them exactly, the way a person speaks who has learned that words spent freely get you nothing, and words spent carefully sometimes get you kept. She called Halden by a word of her own that was not quite any of our words, a soft 2-note sound, and he answered to it as though it were the truest name he'd ever had. She called me by the sound the ledger stylus makes on the slate, which was her small joke, and I answered to it. And I am not ashamed to say that of all the names I have been called in a long life, that one is the one I would keep. And that would have been the story. A wrecked skiff, a small one saved, an old mender and an old ledger keeper, and a hard town that closed around a child the way an oyster closes around a bit of grit and made of her, over a slow year, something like a pearl. That would have been the whole of it, and it would have been enough, and I would not be telling it, because who tells the story of a thing that only went right? But the renewal houses do not forget their stock. The word came up the coast before the man did, the way weather comes before the ship that's in it. A trader off the down-channel run told Merritt, who told Halden, who told no one but did not need to, because I had heard it too, that a Threntally agent had been asking at the ports down the reach, after a harvest skiff lost the previous season on the reefs of the Grey Race, and after its cargo, and whether any of the cargo had come ashore. The word he used for cargo was the word the houses use. It does not translate into anything a decent person would say. I will not set it here. Halden heard it and went still the way he had gone still on the reef the morning he found her. And then he did a thing I did not expect, which was that he came up to my shelf, to me, the ledger keeper, and he sat down heavy beside my slate and he said, "Alan, you keep the record of the town." I said that I did. He said, "Is there anything in it says she was ever here?" And I understood him. I keep the tide ledgers. Salvage law, what the sea gives, the town keeps. I had tallied everything that came up out of that wreck. Cable, plate, a drum rolled back into the sea, and a line in my own hand from that morning that I had written because it is my business to write what came to the kettle. I looked at it. I looked at the old mender, and I did a thing a ledger keeper is not supposed to do, and I have never once regretted it. I took my stylus and I did not scratch the line out, because a scratched line is a line that was there. I wet my thumb and I wore it away slow until the slate was gray and blank where she had been written, until there was no line at all, until the record of the town said the sea had given us cable and plate and nothing else that morning. "There's nothing in it," I told him. "The sea took everything but scrap that day. It says so here." He looked at the blank place a long time. Then he put his hand on my shoulder, which humans do and old do not, and I have learned to let them, and he said, "Thank you," which was the only time in 10 years he ever thanked me before the work was done, and it was because he knew the work was only starting. Sark came on a still gray morning at high water, which is the only time a ship can come in at the kettle, and he came in a clean gray cutter with the mark of the renewal houses on the bow, and he did not run without lights and he did not hide, because he was not doing anything in his own eyes that needed hiding. That was the thing about Sarka that I have never been able to put down in any ledger and have never been able to forget. He thought he was in the right. A Thren is a merchant to the marrow of him. They are a tall, gray, close-faced people who tally the world the way I tally the tide. Everything a number, everything a weight, everything a thing that can be owned and moved and sold, and Sarka had a writ. And to Sarka a writ was the shape of the world made plain. He came ashore with 2 others, tithe-men, big and quiet and armed under their coats, and he came up the terraces to Halden's shed with a slate of his own in his long gray hands, and he was, I will grant him this, unfailingly polite. That was the worst of it. He was polite. The whole town knew he was there. The whole town found reasons to be near the shed. Marit was in her greenhouse door 3 terraces up with her arms folded. The net menders drifted to the rope walks. I was on my shelf with my ledger and my 4 eyes. Nemi was inside the shed, where Halden had put her when the cutter came in, behind him, small, still, listening. Sarka stopped at the shed door and inclined his long head, courteous, and he said, in the flat, clear trade speech the houses use, that he was an agent of the renewal houses, and that he was seeking property lost in a wreck the previous season, and that he had reason to believe it had come ashore in this town, and that he came in good faith to recover it, and to pay a recovery fee to whoever had sheltered and maintained it, for the houses were reasonable and understood that a lost article well kept had costs. He said it all like that. He used the word maintained. He named a figure for the recovery fee that was, I will tell you plainly, more coin than the whole town of Low Kettle sees in 3 years. He set his slate on the workbench by the door, turned so Halden could read it, the writ of ownership with its seals, the number on it, the number that had been stenciled on the crate, the number I had worn off my slate, and he waited polite for the reasonable thing to happen. Halden stood in the door of his shed. Behind him, in the dark, small, I could see the pale glass green of the child, and her great dark eyes, and the second lid coming across them slow, as she looked at the tall gray man who had come up out of the world she had been born into. Halden looked at the writ a long moment. Then he said, "There's no such property here." Sarka was patient. Thren are patient. It is the one thing they share with my people. He said that he understood the impulse that a well-kept article grows on its keeper, that this was accounted for and there was no shame in it, and that the fee could be raised within reason in recognition of genuine attachment. He raised it. He named a new figure. Marit, 3 terraces up, made a sound in her throat. Haldon said, "There's no property here, there's a child." And Sark, "And this is the thing, this is the whole thing, this is what I have never gotten out from behind my eyes." Sarko did not get angry, did not raise his voice, did not reach for the titheman at his back. He simply corrected the mender, gently, the way you correct someone who has made an honest error of category. He said that he understood the sentiment, but that the article was not a child, that it was EU, that the EU were not persons under any law the houses recognized or any law the reach enforced, that they were a renewable resource, lawfully bred and lawfully owned, and that calling the article a child while touching did not change what it was any more than calling a well a friend changed the water in it. He said it kindly. He believed it. To him it was simply true, the way it is simply true that a weight weighs what it weighs. He picked his slate back up and held it patient, and said that he would give the mender the day to consider, that he had no wish to distress the town, and that he would return at the next high water to collect the property and pay the fee, and he trusted the mender would see reason, because reason, he said, was the only thing that ever held up over time. Then he inclined his long head again, courteous, and he went back down the terraces to his clean gray cutter, and the tithemen went with him, and the whole town let out a breath it had been holding, and the tide turned, and the race began to run out below us, patient, patient, and we had until it came back in. I want to tell you what happened in that shed that night, because I was there for part of it, and because it is the part that matters, and because if I only told you the standing in the door part you would think this was a story about courage, and it is not, or not only. It is a story about arithmetic and a man who would not do it. Haldon had put Nemi to bed on the cot where he set bones, and she had not slept, and neither had he, and near the middle of the night he came and sat on my shelf beside my ledger in the dark, and I lit no lamp because he did not want one, and we sat a while with the sound of the race running out below us. He said, "The town can't fight them, Alan." I said that we could not. He said, "Those 2 he brought are just the 2 he brought. There's more where that came from. A house like that, you refuse them once, they send 4. You refuse the 4, they send a writ and a magistrate and a cutter with guns, and they take her, and they take whoever stood in front of her, and the town burns for it, and she goes back in a crate anyway. That's the arithmetic." He said the word the way Marit had not said her word, flat, exact, hadding it. "That's the honest arithmetic, and I've done it 4 ways in my head since he stood in that door, and it comes out the same every time. We give her up or the town pays, and she's taken anyway. Every column adds up to the same total. Give her up." I did not say anything. I am a ledger keeper. I know that when the numbers all come out the same, the thing to do is check whether you have measured the right things. He sat there. The race ran out. And then he said the thing I have carried longest, longer than the standing in the door, longer than any of it. He said, "So I'm not going to do the arithmetic." I asked him what he meant. And he said, slow, feeling for it in the dark the way he felt for a fracture, "The arithmetic's their tool, Alan. It's the thing they built. You put a person in it and the person comes out a number, comes out a weight, comes out a well you never stop pumping, and every answer it gives you is give her up because that's what it was built to answer. He's not wrong about the totals. He's wrong that the totals are the thing that matters." He was quiet. Below us the reef took the outgoing tide, over and over. I spent a long time in a war where everybody did the arithmetic. Whole world of men adding up who to spend and who to keep. Best men I knew did it beautifully. And I have watched my whole life since what a person turns into once he's decided the sums are allowed to include people. He turns into that. He nodded down the terraces toward the cove where the gray cutter lay. Polite, reasonable, sure he's right. I'd sooner die in that door than let the sum come out of my mouth. Not because I'll win. I probably won't. Because the day I let a person be a number is the day I'm him, and I'd rather be dead than be him. And if that's not reason, then I don't know what reason ever was for. I have kept ledgers all my life. I have never heard anyone say a truer thing about them. He got up off the shelf. He stood a moment in the dark. Then he said, "You wore her out of the book already." I said I had. "Then the record says she was never here." He said it slow, working. "So there's nothing for a magistrate to take, no line. He's got a number on a crate and a writ for cargo the sea took. Let him prove the sea gave it back. The sea doesn't keep books." He almost laughed. It came out dry. "I need the town to say the same thing. Every soul. The sea took everything that morning but scrap. Nobody ever saw an EU. There's a mender's ward up here, an orphan of no kind anyone can name. Been here since anyone remembers, and the mender's raising her, and that's the whole of it, and it's dull, and it's nobody's business. If 200 people say the same dull thing and mean it, a writ for cargo is a piece of paper about a thing that isn't here." He looked at me. "You think they'll say it?" I told him what I knew, which was that Low Kettle is a town of people who ended up here, and that people who end up here are people the arithmetic came out wrong for at least once, and that there was not one soul on the terraces who did not know, in their own bones, what it is to be counted as less than a person by someone polite. I told him they would say it. I told him he did not know his own town if he thought otherwise. He put his hand on my shoulder again. Then he went to spend what was left of the night sitting up beside a small green child who could not be badly hurt and had never once in her life been safe. Word went along the rope walks before dawn, quiet, the way word goes in a town where everyone is close and no one asks too much. By the time the tide turned to come back in, there was not a soul at the Kettle who did not know the dull true story, that the sea had taken everything but scrapped the morning of the wreck, that the mender kept a ward, an orphan of no known kind, dull, ordinary, nobody's business, that if a tall gray man came asking after cargo, the sea does not keep books. Merritt came down from her greenhouse and stood with Halden. The net menders came off the rope walks and stood near. My own folk, the ole, came down slow and flat-footed and stood, because we do not mind waiting and we had decided what we were waiting for. I closed my ledger and I came down off my shelf, which I had not done for anything in a year, and I stood too. 200 souls of 6 or 7 kinds on the black terraces above the reef, waiting in the gray for the water to bring the buyers back. I will tell you how it went, and then I will tell you what it cost, because both are true and the cost is the part that keeps it honest. Sark came at high water in his clean gray cutter, and he came up the terraces with his 2 tithe-men and his slate, courteous, patient, sure. And he found the whole town in his way. Not a wall of it, not fists, just the town standing on its own terraces at its own doors, doing nothing, going nowhere. 200 faces turned toward him with the particular blank patience of people who have all agreed to be dull. He came up to Halden's shed and Halden stood in the door of it, and behind Halden the shed was empty, because we had taken the child up to Merritt's greenhouse 3 terraces higher while the cutter was still coming in, and she was there among the green with old Merritt's hand on her shoulder, watching down through the glass, small and still. Sarkoy set his slate on the workbench, turned so Halden could read the writ, and he named his fee, the great figure, higher than before, and he said he had come to collect the property and pay the recovery, and he trusted the mender had seen reason. And Halden said, "There's no such property here. The sea took everything but scrap the morning that skiff broke. Ask anyone." Sarkoy was patient. He said the writ named cargo lost on this reef. He said he had reliable word the cargo came ashore. He said the town's record would surely show what the sea had given. And that is where I stepped forward, old and flat-footed and slow, the ledger-keeper of Low Kettle, and I put my slate in his long gray hands, open to the line from that morning in my own hand. Cable, plate, a drum returned to the sea, nothing else. I keep the record of what the sea gives this town, I told him in his own flat trade speech. It gives us scrap and it gives us grief, and that morning it gave us both. There is no cargo in it. There was never any cargo in it. The sea does not keep your books, agent, and neither do I. He read the line. He read it twice. A friend does not take a number on trust, and I watched him understand that the record said nothing, and that a writ for cargo the sea took is a writ for a thing that is not there, and that 200 people were going to go on saying dully forever that the sea took everything but scrap. He was not a fool. He understood that he had come a long way up a hard coast to collect a well that a whole town had agreed did not exist. He tried still the arithmetic. He raised the fee again. He named a figure that made even Merritt's breath catch, 3 terraces up, and he addressed it not to Halden now but to the town, to all of us, because the house had taught him that every person is a number and every number has a price, and he thought that if he only found the right figure a town of poor folk on a wet cliff would remember, suddenly, that the sea had given something after all. He said the coin would build the terraces new. He said it would buy nets and glass and grain for years. He said it, courteous, patient, sure, to 200 people who had each been a number once, and he did not understand. He could not understand. It was not in him to understand that he had just told a town of the discarded exactly what they were worth to him, which was a fee, and that there is no figure high enough to buy back the one time you refuse to be a number. Not one soul spoke. That was the whole of our answer. 200 people and the wind, and below us the gray race coming in against the reef, patient, patient, and not one soul spoke, and the silence went on, and it was the loudest thing I have heard in a long life of quiet. And Sark, at last, did the thing that told me everything about what the arithmetic does to the ones who serve it. He gathered his slate. He inclined his long head, courteous even then, and he said that he was disappointed the town had chosen to be unreasonable, that he would file the loss, that the houses would note Low Kettle as a place where property was not recovered, and that he trusted we understood the consequences of a place getting such a name. And then, because he was, to the marrow, a merchant, and a merchant cuts a loss, he turned and went back down the terraces to his clean gray cutter, and he took his 2 tithe-men, and he did not draw a weapon and he did not burn a shed, because none of that was in the ledger he served. You do not spend blood and fire on a well that a whole coast will now swear was always dry. It costs more than it returns. The arithmetic he lived by in the end was the thing that saved us, because we had made ourselves cost more than Nemi was worth to him, and a number cannot want a thing past its price. The cutter went out on the falling tide. We watched it down the gray race until the channel took it around the black headland and it was gone. Now the cost. I said I would tell it, and I will, because a story that only tells the standing in the door and not the cost is a lie, and Halden hated a lie worse than he hated the buyers. We did get the name. Sarke filed his loss and word went along the coast the way word does, and Low Kettle became, on the ledgers of the renewal houses and the traders who deal with them, a place where property is not recovered. For a poor town on a hard channel, that is not nothing. Some traders stopped putting in. Some goods got dearer or stopped coming. A hard place got harder. There were folk at the Kettle that first year after, who did the arithmetic themselves, quietly in the dark, the way Halden had, who added up what one small green child had cost the town in trade and name and ease, and got a total, and hated the total, and looked at the child among the greenhouse rows and knew, the way Halden knew, that the total was not the thing that mattered, and did not say the sum out loud, because to say it out loud is to be Sark. They kept the harder life and they kept the child and they did not do the buyer's arithmetic, and the not doing was the whole of what made them still themselves. That is what it cost, and that is what it bought, and I have set both in my ledger, in the one line that has no column, where I keep the things that matter. Halden lived 7 more years. He mended bones and nets to the end, and he raised the child, and he never once let her be kept from living to keep her from harm. Nemi grew slow, for her kind grows slow, and learned her marks off my slate until she kept a better ledger than I do, and learned mending off Halden's hands until she set a bone as clean as he ever did. And when he got too old and gray and worn down to what would not wear to hold the work, she held it for him, and the town brought its broken bones and its torn nets to a pale green mender with great dark eyes and a second lid that came across slow when she was thinking. And no one anywhere on that coast ever again called her cargo, because there was no one left who did not know exactly what she was, which was the mender of Low Kettle, which was a person, which was ours. He died in the season the race runs its hardest, at high water in his own cot, with the child he had named holding his hand, grown by then, though small still, small always. I was there. He was past most speaking, but near the end he found some, and it was not to me and it was not grand. It was only to her. The two-note name she had given him answered with the true one word he had, and he said it to her the way he had said her name in the shed that first gray day, direct, to a person and not to a thing. Nemi. And she answered with the sound of a stylus on a slate, which was my name, her old small joke, because she wanted him to know I was there too, that he was not alone, that we had all of us stood in the door. And then the race took the tide out below us, patient, patient, and it took him with it, the way the sea takes everything but what the town keeps. I am very old now, and I still keep the tide ledgers, though Nemi keeps most of it and lets me keep the appearance because she is kind, the way he was kind. And when the traders' talk turns, as it does on this coast, to what a thing is worth, this weight of salt, that length of cable, the fee a house will pay for a well that gives and gives, I think of a tall gray man with a writ and a soft correcting voice, who came to us sure that a child was a number because the ledger he served had never once been wrong. And I think of an old mender in a shed door who had done the arithmetic 4 ways and gotten the same total every time and then refused, out loud, to say it, because the day you let a person be a sum is the day you are the thing that sells them. The buyers priced her like something you could grow back. They were not wrong about her body. They were wrong about the only thing that ever mattered, which is that a person is not the well they can be pumped, and that there is no figure high enough, on any slate in the reach, to buy the one word a decent man will stand in a door and die before he'll trade. There is no column for that, I have looked. In all my keeping I never found one, and I am glad, because if there were such a column the buyers would have filled it in, and they would have one, and she would have gone back in a crate with a number on it, and the sea would have kept no book of her at all. She was never cargo. The sea gave her and the town kept her. It says so in the one line that has no column in my own worn hand.